Good afternoon and welcome to a special edition of Counsel with the Counsels where we talk with our A&S Champions and our Bardic Champions.
Art, science, singing, storytelling, strumming.
All the above.
All of the fun things. Fantastic. And we're talking because right now we're looking at A&S Champs coming up very, very soon, and a little farther down the calendar, Bardic Champs, but we have plans. And I like this because these are two different forms that are easily presented and competed in a virtual format. I think down the line later, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do our other champions. But
in all honesty, this is what's been really keeping the Kingdom together as a whole with the arts and sciences online and being able to participate and being able to do Bardic online, which they just did an actual Bardic event yesterday where they held winter nights where it was a big competition and everything like that. So it was really, really, really fun. And we just watched Henry V today, right before we had Counsel with the Counsel. So that was a really good thing to watch.
Yeah, it's been a great weekend. So let's talk A&S Champions. If someone wanted to compete for A&S Champions, what's step one? What are we looking at?
Okay, good evening. Yeah, it is evening, Your Majesties. We wanted to give you a little overview about what the competition is going to entail to start with, if that is okay.
Perfectly.
So as you well know, and as our populace knows, we are in a pandemic year. And for that reason, we are able to bring our Arts and Science Championships to you virtually by the grace of your consuls and, of course, our Ministry of Arts and Science. And that's going to happen over the month of January online. So our plan at this point is to have websites hosted for each entry and to allow for competitors who would like to vie for the roles of champions in the Kingdom, and also for people who would like to display their artistry. A couple of things that are important to note. Registration opens for the A&S Championships on November the 13th. And then you have 1 full month to actually get everything in. But the deadline is firm for the 13th of December. So opening the 13th of November, closing the 13th of December. Advanced submission of all documentation is going to be required because obviously our judges are going to have to review material. Things will have to be prepared for your website and things will have to be put into a format that makes sense for us. And so we are asking that all of those things happen by January the 10th. The first round of judging is then going to be the week of January 17th through 23rd. And that is also when the displays will make their way to our website. And our good counsels will be joining us for that judging from January 24th through the 31st. There is a lot of more detailed information about what's happening with the competition on our website. The Ministry of Arts and Science has a website, and there are many, many cool things there. There are blogs, there's information about this specific thing for entrants, for people who would like to volunteer to judge. Hint, hint, and for all sorts of other information that you might want about ministry, about this competition in particular, and also about other fun things that the Ministry of Arts and Science is doing at this time. So you don't have to remember any of the dates I just threw at you. You can just go to the website and it's all clear as day there for you.
That is excellent information. I'm really, really impressed.
Excellent. And yeah,
deadlines are fantastic. I love the clear deadlines. I work better with a deadline.
I do too.
Yeah, so that actually segues really, really well into our next section, which is how do you know if you should compete in a competition for Arts and Science Champions? You know, His Majesty has just said to us that he knows that he works better with the deadline. That's something that's good to know about yourself as you're going forward. I would say that one of the most important questions to ask yourself as you're thinking of entering this competition is, why do I want to enter? What is the goal I have in mind? What will I bring to it? What is it that I want to share in my skills or in my knowledge? What is it that I will gain? And also what is it that I will give to the kingdom as I do this experience of preparing something for competition? So some of the questions that come in mind, there's a lot of different reasons why people compete, but sometimes people do it because they just have something they're so excited about. They want to put it out there for everybody to see. They want to teach. They want to just spread the word about this cool thing that they do. Sometimes it's that they want visibility for what they do. They want to present themselves in a way that people can see what it is that they're, working on in their barony or shire or in their territory. Sometimes people do it just to challenge themselves. They have a thing that they want to get done and they want that deadline. So they think, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do championships so that I'm prepared and I know that by X date it must be done. And that is a good check. There's also a little bit of an impetus for some to want to do it for validation, just to get the little pat on the head that, yeah, what you're doing is super, super cool. And all of these things are valid. All of them are valid. One of the things that is important to think about when you're entering the competition portion of this particular event is that it is a competition. And competitions are set up so that some people win and some people don't. And there's a little bit of a personal accounting that has to come to play when you're in that situation. How do you respond to the possibility that someone doesn't understand your work, or that maybe you didn't get it all done the way you wanted to, or maybe you got it done totally the way you wanted to, but it's not quite right. Any of these things could happen, and only you know how you're going to respond to those things. So I think that personal accounting is really, really important. When we think about what it is about competitions that's hard, there's a lot of different things, but I think one of the triggers I see most often is fear. And I see usually these three facets of fear. One of them is fear of judgment, which is tied into a lot of our own emotional responses to stuff. How will people see what I have done? And all of those things that go with it, and our complications with that. In many ways, that's the hardest to deal with because it's kind of a unique custom forum type of thing that deals with how we think and how we interact with the world. So we're going to put that one aside for a second. The other thing is fear of preparedness, fear of, will I get it done? Is it done well? Can I do X, Y, Z? How will it present? All of those things about the actual nuts and bolts of getting the work to a competition. So when we look at the second one, Amelie's going to have the privilege of telling you this really cool tool that's going to help you with this preparedness portion. So I'm going to leave that to her to speak about. And the third is the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen? How is it going to be framed together? Who's going to be my judge? How do I rank? How do I stack up with who else is going to be there? And the unknown is simply this, the unknown. You can defend yourself against the unknown by preparing yourself with all of the information that's possible, knowing your stuff back and forth, getting your documentation done early, looking at the rubric, going through the website so that you know everything that there is to know about this competition and have read all of the cool source materials that have been provided for competitors over the years, really. So really giving yourself that base of knowledge. But wait, there's more, because the Ministry of Arts and Science has people, and these people are really enthusiastic about making sure that your project gets the play that it can get, that it looks the best it can look, that you feel the best about your experience, that you have all of the availability to you for resources, for how do I do this? How does it come together? Maybe getting you to speak to someone who's presented this thing before. There's all sorts of ways in which we can assist you, but we have to know you need the assistance. So this fear of the unknown can sometimes cause a little bit of shutdown and make you not seek that information, but I'm going to invite you to push through that fear first. Get to us, get to the website, really try to arm yourself with all of the knowledge that's already out there. And then if you notice that there's a gap, that there's knowledge you're seeking that is not out there, you have a question. And there are people who are happy to answer that for you. So that is my big thing about when you're looking at competition. There's a lot of personal interrogation. There's a lot of honest, authentic interrogation of how you think and why you're doing this that has to come into play. And I would say that the best reason to compete is because you want to test yourself. You want to see what you do the best. You want to see how far your breadth of knowledge at this point can take you on any given day. Because the competition is, again, about one day, one project. So it's not in any way saying anything about your basic humanity or who you are as an artisan. It is a day in the life of an artisan. So if you can get together that sort of composure for one day and deal with whatever it is that comes up on that one day, then yes, competition is excellent. But it's not for everyone, and it's not necessary that it be for everyone. If your purpose is to show your work at a Kingdom event in front of a wide variety of people, you can display. And as the name implies, that means that you show us what you do, that you do the same work. You could even do it to the same extent as the Kingdom rubric outlines and just not compete. You can say, I'm going to do all of my documentation and I'm going to have it together as if this were an entry for championship. I'm going to do everything on the planet, but I'm going to put a little note that says, thank you so much for checking my display. Feedback is welcomed, or feedback is, I thank you for your feedback, but at this time, maybe so-and-so will take the feedback for me, or maybe I'm not in a place to accept feedback at all. Because when you're displaying, you don't need to take feedback. Yes.
I have a quick question that's coming in over here on the display, and I have a tiny person I live with. This is my daughter Davia, who has been following kind of the display side with some interest and can I ask you a question? Okay. So as a youth, her understanding is that she can't, like, if she's got a piece that she's working on that she's documented, she can display.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Like, so am I driving her to the same website, the same deadlines as everyone else, but just making sure that she's display only?
I will let Lissa take this on because
do you want me to grab that, Lissa?
I'm good with it. It's okay. Thanks. So what you can do is you can, if you go to the website, if you click on their registration links when they're up, there will be a separate one for display. So there'll be a competition registration, then a display registration. As a display entrant, your entry can be mixed in with all the others. We also do have a special youth liaison. So we have someone for you to talk to who can help you with your entry, who can help you get your materials together if you need it. That information is also on the website. It's Baroness Maria from Concordia. So if you do have any questions, please reach out and we can hopefully support you. And I'd love to see you present your work.
Yes.
Just a quick clarification. Hi, I'm Mistress Elena. I'm the Deputy A&S Minister. We did break out the registrations. So while they are all going to the same location, Youth A&S Display has a slightly different registration link because we need to get parental information. So it is a different link, but all of the entries, competitors, displayers, and youth displayers will all be grouped together. So it will all end up in the same place using the same format, but it is a slightly different link, but it's in the same location as Lissa mentioned.
All right. Does that answer your question? Wonderful. I hope we'll be able to see your display entry. That will be very exciting. So I'm always very excited about display because it's one of those places that you can take all of the different fears that you might be having about competition and control for those things in a way that takes care of you, because ultimately everybody wants you to have the best experience possible in arts and science in the SCA in the East Kingdom. So if that means competing and bringing all of your work to bear to be measured against other work, do that. And we're happy to support you do that. But if you want to bring all of your work in any level that it happens to be and just show us who you are as an artisan without any competition or metric, then do that please as well, so that we can see you and laud you and take a good view of all of the things that is wonderful about arts and science in the East. I'm going to point you to two things specifically. Again, that Ministry of Arts and Science website, which is so nifty and cool. We have a beautiful blog post by our Crown Champion, the High Lady Lee van Hoensee, about whether you should compete in A&S, which is something that you should definitely take a look at, because I think it gets a little bit deeper into some of these interrogations that you should go through as you're considering whether this is for you or not. And also, we have a webinar that was given by Mr. Selena Hilton about consent in A&S, which is, I think, an important component here, so that you feel that you're entering into a contract with this experience in a way that you've actually consented to, that you understand what it is, and that it's something that you have agreed to for yourself and to participate in with others. So those are the things that I would like to say about entering the A&S, and I'm going to pass it on to my cohort, Amelie van Hoofsee.
Hello, friends. I am the Sovereign's A&S champ, Amalia. So now we've talked about, do you want to enter or not? So now let's say you've decided, yes, I want to enter the A&S Championship. What do you do next? So my number one recommendation, and everyone who has asked me so far, how do I best prepare? My number one recommendation is read the rubric. This is available on our website, which is, if you didn't know, moas.eastkingdom.org. It's nice and accessible. So read through the rubric. And I would recommend that you read it several times, because the first time you read it, it can be difficult to grok entirely what all the different shades of meaning are. So really take some time to sit with the rubric. And if after reading it, you're still not quite sure what's going on, we're here to help. Mr. Selena has already put up a fantastic class. It's already on our YouTube channel, all about the rubric training. Here she discusses the general rubric. A little bit later, we're going to have a specific class that covers performance and research, because those are a little bit different. But the general rubric is a great thing to get to know. So that is my biggest recommendation for how to start preparing. Now, you may be coming into this saying, well, I have a project that's already half started or maybe already completed that I really wanted to submit to Crown A&S. Can I do that? So here's my recommendation for that. Again, make sure, so you have this completed or in progress project. Make sure you still read that rubric. That's very important. I think one of the big places where artisans run into frustration is when they try to retrofit a project that they have completed to the rubric and they discover, oh, it doesn't quite fit. It's kind of, round peg, square hole kind of, or square peg, round hole kind of situation. If that's the case, maybe there's a way. If it's a finished project, maybe that could be a jumping off point. Maybe that could be an inspiration. If you've already started a project, but it's not done, how could you alter your process or your materials? What changes could you make now that you've read the rubric and have a better understanding? So I think that many of us as artisans, myself definitely included in this category, we have tried to retrofit a completed project to a rubric, and it has not worked out well for us. And that's okay. We all do it. So I want to help save you that headache by advising that, if it doesn't fit, don't try and make it fit. It's okay. And another thing to keep in mind is you don't have to aim for sixes. So our rubric goes 1 through 6 in terms of scoring, 1 being the lowest, 6 being the highest. I believe we have never had a perfect score with this rubric. That is not the purpose of this. So if you have a project that you think fits really well in, say, your materials, but maybe you use some modern methods, maybe it's still a perfectly fine project because we have, it could score really well in one area and not as well in another, but that's okay. You don't need to have, 100%. The rubric score is not a grade. We are not telling you you are a good or bad artisan by this number. And I think, those of us who are, good students in school and wanted to get all A's and all of that can struggle with that. I know that I have struggled looking at that number and saying, but it's not 100%. It doesn't matter. It truly is not a measure of your worth as an artisan. It's not even a measure of your general skill as an artisan. It's a measure of this one project. So trying not to take it too personally, but rather use it as a learning tool will help you get the best results with the least emotional angst. I think. I like to think of the rubric think of it as your friend. The rubric wants to help you. The rubric is a guide to help you be as thorough and thoughtful as possible in your project. So if you're coming to the table and you haven't started anything, but you have a great idea, you are in a wonderful position to use the rubric to really fully guide and form your process. Not this past A&S Champs, but the one before, Mistress Leonette had entered some of her scribal work. I think it might've been her very first A&S competition ever. I know it was her first time at Champs. And she made it to the final round and she was kind of shocked by that. But she just said, well, I just read the rubric and did what it said. And following that attention to detail and really knowing what's going on with why we're getting at those specific things will really help your process and your progress. And if you're not sure where you are in this process, if you have some ideas or if you have something that's in progress or something that's finished and you're just honestly not sure, or if you just want feedback, we have consultation tables. Obviously, they're not physical tables right now, but on the MOAS website, we now have a Google form for you to fill out. If you would like help, if you would like feedback, if you have questions, please reach out to the MOAS. We are here to help you. We can provide a variety of different kinds of feedback. We can even do a mock scoring for you using the rubric so that you have an idea of what you're getting into, so that you're not going in there, being suddenly shocked by what happens. So we have a lot of tools to help you be prepared. Again, I highly encourage you to check out some of the classes that have already been put up on the YouTube channel. We have 3 so far. Fiore mentioned a few. We have Consent in A&S, which is fabulous, and answers a lot of questions about that psychological journey that you go through in A&S. We have the general rubric, just a class that covers just the different portions of that, so you can better understand what the intent is behind why those were written. And then Fiore just did a fantastic class on how to display and sort of getting into the mind of the artisan and figuring out how can I best showcase the work that I've done. And that can help shape the way that you're thinking about planning your project. So yes, biggest takeaway from this is read the rubric and reach out to the MOAS. Please, we are here to help you if you have questions.
Is it possible the rubric was intentionally written to prevent people from scoring perfectly?
It may have been.
I'm going to roll it back just because I'm very happy to hear all of this information being given and all of the feedback that you have given and all of the incentives and everything, and to know that the A&S community is not alone in trying to figure out what this rubric is. I've been in the SCA for a very long time. I did compete early on in my SCA career in some A&S competitions, which I did not get a lot of positive feedback for. So I'm very happy to hear that there is a rubric and there is just something for people to go, hey, I want to get involved. And there is this great load of information from the MOAS office that will give me some help and some guidance. I'm really happy to hear all of that.
knowing the expectation is
Knowing the
always very
expectations
critical.
is great.
So I think the last thing Amelie and I had to offer you today is we wanted to talk about our personal journeys to championship. And Amelie, would you like to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure, I am happy to go first. Yes, so my personal journey this year. So what I submitted was a piece of embroidery. Embroidery is my thing in the SCA. So this was actually my second time entering Champs this past year. So Champs 2019 was my first time doing A&S Champs. I also brought a piece of embroidery. It was a completely different project. But that was an example of, I was mid-project when I discovered the rubric. And so it fit okay in some spots. It fit really well in some spots, and in others, it was less great. And that was fine. It still scored I was still very happy with that experience, and I got great feedback. But that allowed me to come into 2020 A&S Champs really knowing that, okay, the rubric is the place to start. And so I sort of promised myself that I was going to let myself dive as deep down rabbit holes as I wanted to. But I also kind of promised myself that when I decided I was done with that, it was okay to not, go whole hog on everything. So for example, I got really deep into figuring out how to transfer embroidery patterns onto fabric using period methods, and ended up making a quill pen and making my own ink and doing crazy stuff that I never thought I would be doing. But I learned a ton in that process. On the other hand, by the way, an embroiderer would never have done that. So I was generally trying to stay within the realm of what an embroiderer would do, but then that was kind of the squirrel that I just had to follow. And I indulged myself, and I learned a lot, and probably will do more with that in the future. An example of where I stopped myself from being too obsessive, I was looking for the exact right size of gold thread compared to the size of the linen fabric that I had. And I found something that was really close, but wasn't quite there. And I had searched for quite a while, and eventually I just kind of came to peace with the fact that, you know what, I'm not sure that even exists. And I have put enough time and energy into this. I know why I looked for it. And it was getting to the point where that wasn't really serving the project anymore. It was, checking off one little point on the rubric it's tempting to go so far down that it kind of defeats the point of the rubric. If it's not serving you, move on. It's okay. So yeah, my personal progress or project, I started pretty much right after Penzic. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I took some Penzic classes, and that got me really inspired. I spent at least 2 months, I think, just reading and researching and trying to figure out how the heck am I going to do this? I intentionally picked a project that I thought was too hard for me because I wanted to see what would happen. And I figured if I'm going to pour a lot of time into something, I want to really up my game. So I intentionally picked an art form that I thought was too hard and spent a lot of time researching and just letting myself dive into the minutia of how I thought it might have been done and what I thought they might have used. I did some experiments. I tried all sorts. I think I tried like 6 different kinds of gold thread to figure out, what works best, what best approximates how their stuff looked using modern materials. And I learned a ton. There are clear mistakes in my finished piece, but I have never been prouder of my mistakes because I can point to that and say, I learned not to do that again. And yeah, it's the finished piece is I think the greatest example of it being really proud of something that still has mistakes in it.
And it was gorgeous. I'll just throw that out there. My journey was a little different. I've been in the Outlands for just 3 years now, and I hadn't competed in anything before the A&S Championships this year. And I knew that I wanted to, in some way, introduce myself to the East. I wanted to kind of get people to understand the journey I had been through in the SCA before I got here. You know, I didn't arrive here new, so I didn't want to feel like I couldn't offer the knowledge I already had or show the artistry that I had already gained. So my goal was initially to try to find a way to introduce myself to the East. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, so I procrastinated. But while I procrastinated, I did a really smart thing. I started taking advantage of these video webinars that were being hosted on the rubric. So I ended up seeing 3 sessions in total on rubric training. So I understood how competition worked, and I understood, I had seen some sample grading, and I had seen people interact with the rubric. So I had this idea in my head that the East was going to be able to accept my particular type of nerdiness, because what I geek out on is, you know, I do 16th century Florentine clothing and the accoutrement and lifestyle, I guess, products for a Florentine illegitimate woman. So I live my SEA life in a pretty tight box, but I knew it was going to be something there. I just didn't know what it should be. So I procrastinated longer. And while I was fiddling around, the deadline for actually deciding to do the competition was looming. And so I found myself the week before the deadline launching and saying, yes, this is my project. This is what I'm doing. Off it goes. And then going, holy people. I was a little freaked out. I do not recommend this at home. So these are the things that I knew when I did this. I sew very quickly. I am an exceptional planner. I am very good at dividing tasks into component parts. And so what I did after I boxed myself in was I created a spreadsheet of every part of the project and all of the steps in that part and little checklists and how I was going to do each part and dates by which each part of that project had to be complete for me to arrive with things ready on the day of A&S. So if you're going to procrastinate until deadline day, I suggest you have a brain that can do that. Otherwise, it might really suck. It still kind of sucked, but I got it done. So we go through all of that. And what my offering was my process. I had a veste that was being created for a specific event in the life of Fiore Leonetta Bardi, which is the music festival of Ferrara of the 1570. And I knew that this veste would have to be mocked by a tailor and sent to her as an illegitimate. She wouldn't have a tailor in-house. And so I showed the process of creating the bar tapes, of thinking about how patterning would be done, of the process of making that outline, even making the choice not to try to trim it out, or I didn't have time to do goldwork embroidery with the amount of time I had. That will eventually be on that project. But not even trying to put trim on it and making it look finished, because that wasn't part of my process. What I wanted to show is East Kingdom, here's how I think, and this is what I believe about making clothing, about making Florentine clothing. And, you know, for better or for worse, I also ended up declaring all of my mistakes. Because what you do when you have a project that you do in such a short amount of time is that you will make many, many, many mistakes, and you will see them and not have time to fix them because you have a short amount of time. So showing the process of making mistakes and trying to fix them and trying to declare what the internal parts of how I work were ended up being part of the project. So a very flawed project in many ways, but done in a way that still scored fairly well. So I think that's, for me, it was a lesson in 2 things. A lesson in, 1, my process does work. I just need more time. And a lesson in understanding that the rubric is a good guidepost for understanding that you don't need to aim for a 6. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I procrastinated so long is that I didn't want to go through the rubric and try to check off all of the parts to make it a highest grade in every category. And I thought that if I gave myself too much time, knowing my brain, I was going to get really fiddly. And I just didn't want to do that. That wouldn't have been a true introduction of who I am to my new kingdom. So I don't recommend, please, please, please don't start your project the day you submit things on December 13th. I beg of you. Take all of the time you need, but also know that if there are flaws, if there are mistakes, and if you show us who you are, it might not grade very, very well. It might grade great, but at the end of the day, you go home with you. And if you show your artistry and you show who you are and what you have, then the numbers on a page are numbers on a page. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Those are two fantastic stories. One of the things, and just kind of coming at it from two different ways, one of the things, because a lot of what we were talking about is that encouragement of jumping in at some level to the A&S world, right? Gaining that exposure, gaining that experience. What would you say to someone that's been doing A&S competitions and is hesitant in the virtual space, right? That's very comfortable with what they've been doing, but the jump to not having that in-person interaction is a moment of fear for them.
Before you answer, I just want to make sure that our audience participating, you can ask questions to us, so that if there's anything that you need to know regarding the A&S Champions, you can actually write in, so we can, and then put those over the air to you. So just to give you some thought to his question, and to let our populace know that they can ask questions to us.
Does anybody want to jump in on that? Go ahead.
So one recommendation that I have is if you're feeling nervous about the virtual component, find examples of things that have already happened. There have already been online A&S displays. We have a couple already on the MOAS website. Take a look at those. At Harper's, we did a few. They're not as extensive as what we're doing for Crown A&S, but that can kind of help you dip your toes in. I know for me, as I was preparing to teach classes virtually, I was very nervous about that. It was a thing I had not done much teaching before, much less teaching online. And so I watched a bunch of other classes and I saw, okay, what worked and what didn't work. For example, if you're going to submit something that's fiber related, I highly recommend watching a few classes just to see what shows up well on film. For example, when you're talking to the judges virtually, over Zoom or whatever platform we end up using, what physically can you see in the Zoom camera? Because I know sometimes I was surprised at what you couldn't see, or at the quick fixes, the easy hacks that you can do to make something go from, I have no idea what you're doing, to, oh, that's very clear. Some of that might involve pre-recording. But yeah, so to distill that down into one idea, it's find examples that already exist. It might be a blog post. For example, Morgan Donner has lots of blog posts, or other Scadians that have blog posts. Take a look at a blog, or take a look at a YouTube video, or take a look at a class, and just see how this stuff presents in the virtual world.
I would say also identify what it is that causes you fear. If you think that the fear is that people are not going to be able to connect with you in the same way, perhaps do a practice call with a friend so that you can actually get that satisfaction of, is this actually reading? If it's something that you're not sure displays well, we just did a class, so there's a video, but there's also just thinking about your project and getting on a call again with a friend and saying, can you see this? Putting cameras together. I'm thinking of teaching class for an event in February. I foisted it on my needleworkers group this past week to see what worked and what didn't work. All of the things that I didn't know were going to break broke. So now I know what to fix. So those are the types of things that you might need to test out. But whatever it is that concerns you, whatever the fear is, identifying it will help you. Whether it's that you don't think that your work will translate into the virtual medium, well, you might find someone who's doing that really, really well, or someone who can talk you through it. If it's the personal connection thing, you can see if that's something that you can practice with a friend, or even practice, with anybody who's available. If I'm available, I volunteer. That's just, taking a few minutes, and Amelie does as well, taking a few minutes to kind of have a human sometimes helps you get past that area of nerves. But it could be any number of things, just identifying what it is for you that is making this medium feel concerning in some ways, and then solving for that. And then accepting that some people aren't really good with technology, so they fear that they're not going to be able to do it. It is perfectly acceptable to set up the table in your house the way you set it up at the hall, at whatever venue we had, and stand behind it and present. If that's what you got, that's what you got. If that's not something that's possible because you don't have video, do pictures and audio. I mean, we're trying to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So don't feel that if you don't have a 3-camera setup and lighting that you can't enter this. It has nothing to do with that. It's really just, how can we see your artistry in its best light within your ability and whatever you have available to you right now.
That's all great feedback. We did receive a question from the populace, and I'm sure this is going to probably be difficult to translate into the virtual word for the A&S competition, is the culinary entrance. So if you want to take that on.
So what we did, because we know there are several entries that might be a little bit more challenging in the virtual world, we have liaisons for those entries. We have a liaison for both cooking and brewing. And we also have a liaison for performance, which happens to be Master Grimm. So if you if you are thinking of doing one of those areas, we can put you in touch with somebody who has experience in that topic and who can help you plan it out. Just going back a step, Amalia and Fiore were talking about that they were willing to help you. The MOAS office is also willing to help. So if you fill in that consultation form or email any of us, Mistress Elena, myself, the champions, we will all work with you or find somebody to work with you, because we know for some people, the online venue might be easy. For some, it might be more challenging. So however we can help, you just need to reach out. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard to reach out, but if you can, we're willing to have those conversations and to work with you. And for things like brewing and food and those, I think we're really going to take it person by person to see if we can find a way to find a judge who can make some connections so we can get tastings done. If not, there's a lot we can do with just working with the rubric and the research. And Fiore's wonderful presentation class talked about how to make your dish. She had a glass of wine, how you can present your material to make it so that the audience, even if they can't taste it, can sort of understand what its qualities are.
If I can throw in something too.
Yeah, indeed.
Hello again, I'm Mr. Selena, Deputy A&S Minister. I also just want to point out, as several people have mentioned, I taught the consent in A&S, and one of the things we talked about there is about identifying what's going to be good for you. And I do just want to put out a disclaimer. I've seen a lot of people talk about on social media that they're exhausted and they feel with A&S things happening in the times of COVID, that they are, if they want to participate, in the A&S community, that they have to be entering things and completing projects, and that's really taking a toll on their mental health. To be clear, you never have to. You can take, if life gets in the way and you need to take some time at any point, you should always feel free. You should never feel like you have to enter, you have to be participating, and there are so many ways to participate, but especially right now, if it's something that you would like to do, but you're afraid of, then yes, use all of these things. We would love to help make it accessible for everyone. But if you feel like you're obligated to, but it would not be good for you and your stress levels, feel free to maybe only display instead, check in with us first and try something and, go, and then you can always enter. We still have quite a while before the deadline. But if you're really, really terrified and nervous about participating and you don't think it would be good for your mental health, don't feel obligated. Everyone's in a lot of stress right now. The whole purpose of this is for it to be a joyful, pleasant experience for you. And if you really don't think the virtual would make that work for you, if there's nothing we can do to help, take the time off, relax. The world is far too stressful and scary right now for anyone to feel like if they want to aim for A&S awards in the future, that they have to put themselves through badness now. You definitely don't. Rest, relax, take care of yourself.
You can always come view the entries and leave comments to support other artisans, even if you can't or don't want to enter or display. Every comment that the artisan receives will make them feel good about their work, so that in itself is a service, just looking and giving people feedback.
So we have about maybe 15 minutes left to be talking with our A&S folks, and if there's any other questions from the populace, that feel free to make those questions so that they can answer them. If not, we're just gonna fill in the time with just us talking.
Well, so let me ask a question. You've given me a set of deadlines that gets me all the way through to the end of the competition. What is our vision for what that transition is going to look like? We're going to get to the end of the competition. We're going to sit down with some judges, right? We're going to select some new champions. What happens there?
So because of COVID uncertainty, we really don't know when we're going to go back to meeting in person. So after talking with the champions and after talking with the consuls, I think what our plan is to have champions in waiting, because what we really want to do is try to have a physical event where we can give our outgoing champions a chance to be on the stage again. They only got to do that, I think, once when they won Crowns Champion, and then to give the incoming champions time to get their regalia and sort of have that same experience. So it's going to be a little bit sort of touch and see depending on what happens, but that's what we're thinking about at the moment.
Great. So there are no questions. Okay. Do you want to give any closing remarks, any last minute inspirations to those people who's going to enter?
Amelie, you look like you're taking a breath.
Oh, I'm brainstorming right now. So if you have any thoughts, go for it.
Okay, so my thoughts are going to be, kind of I've said these things already today. I will say them again because I think they're important. I think that who everybody is as an artist is a very unique and very beautiful thing. And as long as you do you, as long as you show who you are, as long as you show your process in whatever state that's in, or decide not to show it, as the case may be, as long as you decide whether I consent to be weighed against other competitors or no, I don't consent to that. I want to do my display instead, and I want to show you what I do. And all of those things are okay. I just want you to really think about what it is that you as an artisan need, who you as an artisan are, and offer only what you feel comfortable offering. I think sometimes we do kind of push ourselves to go a little bit past our lines, and that can be okay, but it's a personality thing. If I go past my line a little bit, I know how I do that. For some other people, that little push past the line might be so detrimental that they lose time and joy. So I just want you to find the joy in whatever this process might look like for you, and stay with your joy. It is more important that you stay joyful and happy and engaged in this process than that you score a certain number on a rubric.
Yeah, and I think jumping off of that, knowing who you are and what your goals are as an artisan is really important as to whether you compete or not, whether, how you handle the competition, etc. Competition might not be for you right now, and that is fine. That is not, that is not that doesn't make you a good or a bad artisan. It just is what it is. So really taking a look at just where you are, what your goals are, what pushes you as an artisan. For example, I'm the kind of person who loves competitions. So I'm the kind of person who, reads, oh, Crown A&S is coming up. Oh, this is going to be fun. If you're the kind of person who says, Crown A&S is coming up, what am I going to do? Maybe you display, as Fiore and Mr. Selena have said, don't let this be a thing that brings you joy, not stress.
And if I can jump in, I just want to say that you have both been fantastic champions. I like that Mr. Slissa talked about the fact that we had you up on the stage with us once, but you have kept propelling the A&S community in the kingdom forward. And I know that our expectations for champions are just, when we're looking at champions, it's people who have enthusiasm and will continue to build and increase the visibility of the arts community across the kingdom. From your side, when we're looking at champions, when someone's thinking about entering, what should they anticipate kind of as their responsibilities moving forward? I'm saying it just because we're in such a weird space. Like I can see someone who has been a champion before still kind of looking at it and saying, but what do I do here?
So I can at least start, and then some of the others can jump in. One of the things that we've been pushing for, especially with this last champions, is when we have that interview with the crown, to focus not on scores, because the way this works is we have finalists who have the highest scores, but because A&S is very subjective, we can't say, oh, there's one winner, there's one person that has the highest score. Any of our scores could be kind of off slightly, so we take that final poll, we have a conversation. We have a conversation with the heirs and the consuls and some of the past champions. And what we do is we talk about that person's process and also their vision and what they think they can bring to the community. Not every past champion, but several past champions have become very much involved in the MOAS office. Both of our champions right now are officers, which is absolutely wonderful. But somebody who is going to be able to, even if they don't, you don't have to work for the MOAS office, but just to go out and champion the arts, make people feel good about what they're doing, help people along on their path. There are many ways to do that. You could just go to events and teach and talk with people and let people know about your experiences. But it's really just someone who's going to try to use that platform to make people feel a little better about arts and sciences and what they can do.
Yeah, I would say one of the probably the biggest thing that I have sought to do as a champion is to listen and support fellow artisans in the East Kingdom. So I try to have an ear out for where might artisans be frustrated or struggling. How are the arts not serving them? How can we help serve them better? And then on the flip side, when an artisan does do an online display or just post a picture on their personal Facebook feed or what have you, to really make a point of going out there and supporting them, even if it's just, that's awesome, when I have, if it's glass blowing and I have no idea what that is like, but I can still go out there and have a voice and support, and just, offering my time and my empathy.
I love that. I totally love that time and empathy. It's interesting because this champion year for me, I started this entire pandemic shutdown in a depressive spiral. I had no arts in me. I had no connect. Yeah, I know you get me drink. I had no create. I lost my create, which is shocking because my motto is penso en creo. I think and I create. But I had nothing. I just didn't have that outflow. So what finally brought me out is I had gotten a message about things that needed to happen on the back of the house with potentially Penzic planning in case Penzic was going to happen. And I remembered that I didn't win champion, I serve as champion. And that to me was a much better place to be. It was an understanding that what I was giving was not like all my artistic stuff, although that came. What I was giving was my presence. What I was giving was my time. What I was giving was my attention. And, serving as champion becomes very different things for different people. But it is that extension of the office is just a visible place for us to be kind of a totem for arts and science. So sometimes that means for me that I'm talking to people a little bit longer than I'm comfortable with in a particular setting. And it's a mixed bag. I am an introvert. I would find that exhausting most of the time, but there's a little pump you get from serving your kingdom. And so that's what I would say, that if you are thinking of how you're going to exert a championship, in the pandemic, in the plague years, thinking about how is it that you serve? How do you like to serve? What is a type of service that makes sense for you and your life until we can all be together again?
Yeah, and
I think our champions did express a lot of what our expectations are of what our champions should do, and I really appreciate them expressing that so well. One of the expectations I do have for the entrance is to definitely reach out and get the resources from the MOAS office. I think that's very important for you to do. We did get a question about someone who's an accomplished artist, but they're very intimidated on the process. So how should they actually start their process?
I think it's the research side of it. I think some of that can come as you start to look at the rubric and you look at the things you do well, and then the areas of the rubric where you start to feel less comfortable. Like how do you take, I do this well, I make the thing real well, but I need to add research in.
And my suggestion to them would be to actually reach out to the MOAS office and get the feedback from them, and to really, if they're really intimidated by that, start small. Start small with the research and then work your way out. Thank you so much for your information. I don't know, do you have anything else for our champions?
I definitely want to say thank you, and we encourage you to stick around just in case we end up with more questions for you. But I want to use this, I want to talk about expectations for a second and use this as my transition. I think that one of my expectations for the champions is to be a vocal advocate for that community to us. When I'm looking at a champion, I'm looking at someone who can represent a community that I may not be as intimately familiar with, and make sure that as the Consuls of the East, that we are paying attention and that we are aware of the support that community needs. And one of my favorite things is sad moment for me, when we lost Penzic, our Bardic Champions still made a lot of that storytelling in those events happen that were still accessible for our kingdom. And I was really happy to see that, because that's one of my favorite parts of Penzic, like the evening, the stories, the songs, and knowing that there were ways that we could help facilitate for them was fantastic. And with the transition of the cat cameo, I'm going to throw to our fantastic bards and start talking about something a little further out on the horizon as we talk about calendar deadlines and what Bardic Champions may look like.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Majesties. Thank you so much, my counterparts in A&S. You gave a brilliantly, carefully detailed, well thought out, point by point presentation. And now we're going to riff. Actually, I have to admit, I do hang out with A&S people some of the time, and it rubs off a little bit. So I actually did prepare a few notes while I was waiting, which is good because I have been known on occasion to ramble. And I don't want to do that here. As His Majesty Tyndall had indicated, the Bardic Championship is still very much in the planning stages. We've really just in the last few weeks gotten a firmer sense of what our ambitions are for it. I'm going to speak to those with the understanding that I believe we're solid on the date, and almost everything else is in the very early stages and therefore subject to change. But I will speak as confidently about as I can about what we've already discussed and what our intentions are. So that it was very important, certainly to me. We wanted to put this out soon enough that you all can start planning. In my experience, and I've competed for this a number of times, I said, Grim, I take 6 months to get ready. I feel, and I feel for me, it can take that long. It doesn't have to. And for those who really, really want to prepare, and particularly with the challenges this year is likely to throw at us, having enough time to really be as prepared as you want to be and as prepared as you can be is the least we can offer you. So the date that we have selected is Saturday, April 21st, 2021. I'm going to repeat this a few times, by the way. The site, all these details will be forthcoming in about the next 2 weeks. I have the week off, week after next, so I'll really be able to dig in and make sure that we go through, have a complete version of the event laid out. A lot of it will be very consistent with what we've expressed in prior years. If you are familiar with Bardic Champs, this is going to look like that with possibly some twists. But the twists aren't necessarily in the rules or the basics of the format. So I said Saturday, April 21st, 2021. The intention, the ambitious intention that we are shooting for is the possibility of a hybrid format with a live site with limited capacity. We have found the site thanks to Mistress Diana. We have had a conversation. There is a limited capacity for what we hope to be safe, socially distanced performance and audience of, I believe, up to 75 people, which is 25% of the site's capacity. We are all prepared for the high likelihood that conditions on the ground will not permit this to happen. There are a whole lot of logistics and challenges that stand between us and realizing this. But I want to lay out what the ambition is that the four of us discussed. The idea was to get a possibility to start a narrative that moves us toward being able to maybe begin to have some events where people get to be together. It is also, by hybrid, I mean you as an audience member, as a performer, or as a competitor will be welcome and enabled to the best of our ability to participate in whatever format is most comfortable to you, as long as it is live and you are actually performing on the day of when it is your turn, remotely or in person. If we are able to have the live site, our intention is to have at least one judge who is going to be remote from site. We want this to really be a level playing field. We do not want anyone to feel, if they are not comfortable, either because of the travel required to get to site or because of the conditions. If we're still able to do it, but you don't want to, we really want you to honestly accept everyone who participates is on an equal footing and has the same shot. It is going to be about what you bring personally to the day, not where you bring yourself to. As such, this looks to be the first time in East Kingdom history that everyone in the kingdom, regardless of where you live, where you call home, as long as you're an East Kingdom populace member, will have an equal opportunity to compete. Basics for those who are less familiar with the fundamental format and rules of the East Kingdom Bardic competition. This is constructed as traditional, as a 3-round all-day event that will probably start in the range of 10, 11 in the morning and run till maybe 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Some of the things that are expected if you participate and compete, you will be providing an index card size summary of yourself as a performer, your persona name, and the types of performances that are your strengths. And that is for later, which I'll get to, which is if you make it to the finals and receive a challenge from their majesties, they will know what are reasonable things to ask, things that you can competently do and might do on short notice, possibly given a topic, depending on how the day goes. At least one performance during the first 2 rounds is required to have to be informed historically, to be a period sourced, period style, in some manner that is documentable, again, on one side of an index card. This is not the A&S Championship. We just want to see that you have a source and that you've thought it through. 1 round is required. It could be the first, it could be the second, it can be both, and there are people who do both. But we really want you to understand that we mean what we say. Time limits. As in the last few years, because of the prevalence of, we don't know what the turnout's going to be. We'll know as we get closer, because we'll be giving you the deadline in a little bit. The last few years, we have set a time limit of 4 minutes for pieces in the first round and 6 minutes for pieces in round 2. Understand, depending on the turnout, the number of competitors in round 1 will sometimes put constraints on what our timeline looks like for round 2. And as a result, that will shape the judges and their majesties on what degree of call we have to do between rounds 1 and 2. Some years, it can be really harsh and challenging. Sometimes it is more than half of the competitors eliminated between the first and second round. In fact, that's kind of become typical. And this is what we're doing. We'll talk more about the philosophy of this in a few moments, but I wanted to start with the nuts and bolts. There are typically 4, sometimes more. This past year, there were 5. I've seen 6, but typically we go for a final 4. The 4 finalists will be announced, as soon as that second round of judging is done, and they will be given a challenge, either individually or as a group, at the consul's discretion. They will guide themselves, again, using your performer summary, so that what they present you with is appropriate to you, and you'll have a brief period, which typically is 15 to 30 minutes to prepare for it. Might be a little longer this year, but again, that's in flux. There is typically not a time limit on the final round. Understanding, of course, as always, that exhausting your audience when you're that close to the threshold is never a good idea. But the other thing to bear in mind, Grim taught me this very early on, which is Grim likes to liken this to a 2-round judged competition followed by a job interview. The judges who will be the champions and invited judges to be named later. As I said, if we do this hybrid, at least one of them will be remote. We will evaluate the performances and take the opinions and impressions that the consuls have as they watch for the first 2 rounds. But the judges will have a significant amount of input and evaluation as to who are the most qualified performers to move on from one round to the next. The final round is the consul's complete discretion to choose among the finalists who best represents each of them in their role to serve as their champion. And they will consult with the judges to whatever degree they see fit. There will be, or at least we are planning to have, opportunities for people who do not wish to compete to exhibit and to provide performances in between the rounds while the judges are conferring. So similar to, for those of you who missed it, what was discussed with the A&S Champions, if you're not a very competitive person, if this year isn't bringing that out in you, which everyone would understand, if you want to be seen, if you have something to share, we would love to have you perform. If you compete, we strongly ask that you do that only if you are prepared to serve if chosen. And as a basic piece of good advice, if you compete, if you show up for round one, we strongly recommend you have a plan and you have pieces prepared so that you hypothetically can perform capably in all 3 rounds. We have seen some fantastic performers who were just modest enough not to imagine they were. My first time, I have to admit, I had nothing ready. And fortunately, it wasn't an issue. But it's nerve-wracking, exciting, and terrifying to find out you have made the finals if you weren't counting on it. Count on it. Be prepared. Have something ready. Our intention, as I said, is that if we meet in person, competitors will be evaluated on an equal footing. Some of the things that we evaluated about the site, if in case we're able to use it, that I want you to be aware of. There will be a projection screen on site that we hopefully will be able to use if we do that. So that if you are participating remotely, to the extent that the internet and everyone's equipment cooperates, you will be seen. You will be seen and heard by everyone present, as well as everyone who will be on what we expect to be a YouTube live stream of it. I mentioned that at least one judge, if we are able to do this hybrid, will be participating remotely to keep things level. We will have the Zoom and YouTube live streams prepared regardless. So in the event we determine that it really is not appropriate, safe, or just logistically feasible to do the live portion, the date will stay the same. And the same. And
Kendall has a question, so we're just
go ahead.
Jump in real quick
So,
right here.
Yeah, please.
It's less of a question. I just want to emphasize, because I like where you're going and I want to wrap around to that. I think the first thing is, and because we lived through this a little bit with Coronation, right?
Yeah.
The idea, especially when preparing for a competition, that we're marking a date on the calendar and we're committing to that date rather than the specifics of the event is
right.
what I'd like to emphasize here. And just when we say April 21st, 2021, that is 6 months away from right now. And it's a balance of hope and safety. I really hope that we're in a place 6 months from now where this is feasible in the way that Drake is talking about it. But the foremost concern is going to be safety. When we're talking about performance and projecting, I totally understand that there are going to be concerns about the safety in that space. And that's going to be the primary concern as to what the eventual format looks like. And that, I think, is really important. Why the consideration of this as a hybrid gives us the ability to have the infrastructure in place to say, well, it's still that date, but it's virtual. And it does broaden the scope and the reach of the people that are able to participate. Is it going to be everyone? Well, no, because just like we can't all physically get to an event sometimes the idea of performing for the computer or the accessibility we have will vary. But that's something that's always part of everything we do in the SCA. And so,
we're going to speak to that because we want to, we are part of what we have planned is, since we know that one way or another, there are some people who'll be participating remotely. We are going to talk about that in a little bit, that we are going to be having about a month out. We're planning to work with the EK Web Ministry to have a technical check so that everybody who wants
some of the things for the populace is like our biggest concern, and always at the forefront of our minds is safety of our populace.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to keep reiterating that. We're trying to keep some little sliver of hope alive that we may get back together again, hopefully soon. But it's just a matter of trying to just keep things moving, trying to keep the SCA alive with everything that's going on. And just to know from my heart that is definitely one of my number one concerns is the safety of the populace and not to be able to spread this plague. That is something that is always on my mind.
So we know that we should know well before April whether it's becoming clear that it really isn't feasible, and we will do our very best to make sure we don't delay. Once it's very clear that it can't really happen in person, we will announce that. We all accept that that is a high likelihood. And if things really do get better, we're excited at the idea of maybe being ready for that.
Absolutely.
So, and that kind of leads into the next piece I had prepared, if it's all right, which is to talk about the role of the Kingdom Bard, the Kingdom Bardic Champions. We talked about this together. Some of the things that we'd like to speak to, which again, jibe with what Your Majesty said just a bit ago, and of course the A&S Champions spoke to as well. The first role is to encourage and promote performance in the performing arts, not just Bardic, but all performance. It is a vital part of the SCA at all times. And as people have pointed out, it happens to be an activity that is still available to us. It doesn't always feel the same. This job looks nothing like the brochure. But it is nonetheless something we can continue to share, even under these conditions. And that makes it really important. A crucial role of the Kingdom Bards at all times, certainly in my experience of this year, even when, much like Fiore, the tank was empty a lot this year. It's a scary time. It's an exhausting time. We understand it. We are here with you. And yet, one of our roles as the Kingdom Bards is to lift the spirits of the populace, particularly when it is hard. Bear in mind that that is going to be one of the perks and one of the great challenges of the job. I want to make note that so much of the performance that happened this past year, so many of the performing opportunities, aside from one or two that were specifically within our scope, which I'll speak to again, happened because of the phenomenal work of the East Kingdom College of Performers. As Royal Bardic Champions, one of your roles is evolving into being someone who talks to them and stays in communication. Cross-communicate, coordinate with them. One of the reasons we realized it was time to start planning this was Doug Doan, who is was about to step down as our long-serving and phenomenal seneschal, reached out to us once he heard about the A&S competition, because he wanted to get a sense of, did that mean we already had a timetable for the Bardic competition, because he wanted to make sure that we did not end up, clashing in planned events, because he had something in mind for March. And that let me know that when we started talking, we probably should be looking at April at the earliest. And by the time we got there, I said, we can't do it before April, because again, 6 months is really the minimum prep that you deserve. A few more elements of the job. Traditionally, the Kingdom Bards are often called upon to provide a little diversion, a little atmosphere, a little opportunity for a lull in court. That looks a little differently this year than it has looked on the brochure. I will mention that what you bring to the table as a performer, whatever it is, and if you happen to have any technical music background, it turns out that sometimes Santa shows up and it's really, really snowy out, and an unexpected skill set can come in handy. So this may look different at different times, and it looks different every year based on who is wearing this sash. It has looked in past years like a choral coordinator when Martin wore this sash, and he did it really well. It has looked like inspiring speeches. It has looked like poetry. It has looked like little airs here and there. And it may be a lot, and it may be a little. One responsibility is to plan, if possible, with your counterparts in the mid-realm, an inter-kingdom Bardic showcase, which is traditionally held at Penzic, or, as this year, absent Penzic, a mutually agreed upon time. We have counterparts and former champions in Zoph of the Mid-Realm and Sabine of the East, who have agreed to be the institutional knowledge custodians for the foreseeable future. So they will coordinate with you, so you don't have to wonder how it happens, because that was the whole idea behind it. They made it so much easier for us to put it together. It was a lot of fun. Couple more quick thoughts. Bards, historically, in the Middle Ages, as well as in the East Kingdom, have at various times served as the voice, the memory, and the conscience of the realm. It's a serious responsibility. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that implies and how you want to think about it as you prepare in the notes I managed to throw together. As a performer, many of us have a strong desire to savor a moment in the spotlight. As a champion, your role is to be a spotlight. And it's a tremendous honor and privilege. So, at a high level, having talked about it a little, what are we, the champions and their majesties? What are we looking for? What should you start to think about if this is something that excites you? I know that some of you look forward to this every year. I know I have. What are we looking for? Each year, each royal, each champion brings a little bit of themselves and their particular values to it. Grim and I, as champions, our advice, having discussed it, your first and last mandate as a bard and as a competitor is to entertain and engage the audience. All other considerations are secondary to that. I'm not stuttering. The consuls have requested that you bring pieces that uplift and inspire. As we've said, we all know this is a hard time. It may not be the most effective use of your time to dwell on it. Royal bards are often some of the most visible kingdom champions. So as you prepare to compete, I invite you to pay attention to the impact of your words and actions on those around you, particularly online. Your comportment will be noticed in this endeavor, as in so much else in the kingdom. I speak from experience. This is an East Kingdom Championship. If you've been in this kingdom any amount of time, you know that prowess matters. In Bardic, prowess translates to surprise and delight, the ability to take an audience on a journey with you, preparedness, and execution. Also, growth, the ability to demonstrate that people did not necessarily know the full depths of your talents and what you had to bring to the table. These are some of the things that, in my experience, I have seen really elevate competitors to the finals and ultimately to being selected. If you're competing, as I said, be prepared to perform in the finals. And if you are here at all, you should be prepared to serve if chosen. Finally, Bardic should be fun. Your ability to take joy in performing will communicate itself to your audience, regardless of the emotional content of your piece. One of the best things you can do to make sure that you're able to enjoy your performance is to spend the time you need to be over-prepared. If you are stretching yourself, which we encourage, find trusted audiences to share your work in progress with, because it is vital to learn how your nerves manifest when you're under pressure, so that you have the opportunity to get comfortable with the process of catching them, a little bit like a mindful meditation, and dismissing them when they start to get in your way, and be able to recenter yourself in the middle of the performance so that the audience isn't taken out of the moment. You're guiding them. They should be concerned with your story and never with you. The application process, which again is going to be similar to previous years as planned. The details, as I mentioned, the details and rules will be posted hopefully within the next 2 weeks. The deadline we are currently planning to apply, because you must apply in advance, will be 2 weeks before the competition. This will be an email to the Consort's Bard or to the Sovereign's Bard indicating your intention to compete. We will make sure that those email addresses are available on the announcement. That's all you have to do is give us your SCA name, indicate that you're competing. We will put you on whatever spreadsheet we're using to keep track. We will probably check in with all the applicants at least once beforehand. And as I said, the deadline's 2 weeks before, but about a month out, we will have a live streaming technical check to make sure that you have an opportunity. We strongly encourage you, even if you are confident that you know your tech, we still strongly encourage you to participate in this, to get a sense of how well your equipment and your internet connection will work with a Zoom meeting. There is always the possibility, even if we are on an incredibly happy path and you are confident that we are all going to be in person, Lucy may grab that football in ways we can't anticipate. Everyone should be prepared to perform remotely, even if you mean to be there, for whatever reason. Okay. Those are the key things. We will make sure that at that technical session, that there will be people there who are in a position to offer any sound and lighting suggestions that might be helpful given your space, given your equipment, to optimize your performance. Remember, anytime you perform anywhere, at a campsite, at a street corner at Pennsic, over a Zoom call, at a competition, on the Pennsic stage as a concert performer, everyone who's in that audience is looking forward to what you're going to do, is prepared, excited, and fervently rooting for you to succeed. This includes the people who are competing against you. Everyone is on your side when you do this because we are all in this together. That completes my prepared remarks, and I'll open it up. Grim, are there any thoughts you want to add?
Regarding the position, there were sometimes, and this is a little bit unusual, but sometimes you're kind of called upon to be something of a diplomat to other kingdoms. I know in the past I have delivered things, usually poems, but and words, but that is definitely a part of the purview. And I do love what you said about memory. If you are a writer, and it is not required to be a writer,
no,
to be the king or the consort or royal bard, it does behoove you, though, if you are, that you can record what happens. And the only other thing I would add is it is traditional, again, if you're a writer, that you write the scroll for when you go out. So
I know, I was just starting to think about the fact that I have to start working on that.
Yeah. So
I'm intrigued at the prospect of writing a scroll for whom I know not.
That's always a challenge, but in my opinion, the best way to do that is to match their Majesty's personas. And bear that in mind, and I've done things in various styles for that reason.
Right. This is not your first rodeo, so I'll have to. I may check in with you.
It's interesting, Grim, that you talk about kind of that inter-kingdom diplomacy, because I think that one of the things that's really shown during the time of isolation is the ability to, because we're all kind of connecting in the same way, is the way to look past our borders for opportunities, both for collaboration, but to really see what others are doing. And I think that the bards have been kind of the pathway for that.
We had an Anstiorin at Winter Nights yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely lovely because I've met one Anstiorin bard before, and it was fantastic.
Right, and I believe one of our winners yesterday was a friend of mine from Callantyre.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. We had a Kalantari, we had an NCR, and I do not recall. I believe there was at least one or two other people from out of Kingdom, but yeah, and it's really nice. The Bardic circles online, and there are some. They gather people from all over the world. There's apparently one of the biggest one is hosted in Wokhok. So if you're willing to get up early,
or stay up late.
Stay up late, yeah.
I believe it starts 5:30 in the morning.
Right, but like you
Right,
don't
but
think of it
it's-
as tomorrow morning. It's last night.
It's last night, right?
Well, yeah. That's a good question. It's Tuesday, so I don't know if it's Monday night or Tuesday night. I'll have to look that up. But apparently it frequently goes late. So if you're up at like 7 or 8 in the morning, pop in and
It may still be there.
hang on. But it's a wonderful opportunity to interact with people in other kingdoms. It's unfortunate that we're forced into this position, but at least we're getting something nice out of it.
Yeah.
A couple quick thoughts that just occurred to me as I look around. I know that our reigning Sovereigns Bard has been a competitor in the Sovereigns A&S Champ has been a competitor in Bardic Champs, and it only reminds me that some very, very talented people. This is the piece about being prepared to compete. Okay. You never know what the considerations are. We want everyone to do well. We can't bring everyone along through all the rounds. And there are 2 positions available, which is 1 more than some kingdoms and 2 more than a few. I have expressed in the past, because I blog about this on the years when I compete, there's a tremendous pride that I have, and that the other people that I have competed with, especially the ones who I've seen serve in this office, we have the tremendous privilege of being able to compete against a thick, talented, dense, fierce field of talent for this honor. That is not something to be taken lightly. It is an opportunity that a lot of bards I know around the known world would pay dearly to have. There are kingdoms that have comparable, levels of talent, and some of the more complex competitions, perhaps multi-day events. And as I said, it's an incredible experience. It's one of my favorite events all year, regardless of whether I plan to compete and regardless of the outcome. Because goodness knows I've competed a few times, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to serve. And as we've said a few times, competition is not everybody's favorite thing. Not everyone who enjoys competition is always going to be in the mood to compete or in the right headspace. You know your own mind better than anyone. Do what is right for you. We trust in the breadth and depth of this field, that there are going to be some worthy competitors who will ultimately be chosen as our successors. I look forward to seeing who they are. Any other thoughts, including our A&S folks, because we do have overlapping interests. Yeah, I thought I saw someone about to unmute.
Well, I'm going to jump in a little bit, and I know the information is going to be presented online, but where is it going to be presented online? Is it going to be through the MOAS office, or is it going to be a separate link that we need to involve the web ministry in?
I'm perfectly happy to pass it on to the MOAS office. I don't want to blur lines, because
we can definitely find a place to post it on a separate tab, so it's clear what it is with your contact information.
Right. Typically, in years past, I basically look and I expect to ultimately find it on the event announcement, on the Kingdom website. That's where I look for the definitive answer. Sometimes the actual competition rules aren't up until a few weeks after. This year, I'm hoping to make the exception. As I said, I want us to have that information out pretty much at the same time as the specifics about the site, because given the uncertainties of this year, I think the details of the competition are the most important information.
I've always thought of Bardic as a subset of A&S.
Yes, it absolutely is. And
Rather specific.
all I'm saying is, I don't want to. They are distinct championships.
And circling back to what Drake said earlier regarding the finals and the finalists and the consort and Royal Bard, that it is really more so than I think any of the other. Most actually, more so than most of the other champion positions. It is a very subjective field.
Right.
And it really does boil down to their Majesty's preference, and really the finals is as far as you get on merit. After that, it's really up to their Majesties.
Right.
That's what I've always said. I believe I got that from Toki, and Toki got it from Lynette. So
right. And he passed it on to me, and it was sage advice that has taken me through a number of exciting and challenging years. For me, the time that I spend preparing for this competition has been some of the most incredible opportunities for growth, for stretching outside my comfort zone. I often, when I teach about Bardic or discuss it with people, I often use the RPG role-playing game metaphor of a map where you start out and there's this one room that is actually detailed, because that's where you are in the dungeon, and that is all you know. And you can't go anywhere until you clear the room. Once you do, you have to figure out what you're going to explore next, and you don't know yet. You're going to probably need to check out something adjacent to where you are, peek through the door, see whether the monsters look manageable, and whether the treasure and XP you're going to get might be worth your trouble. If not, try another door, and eventually over time, your circle of comfort and your circle of skills and your array of weapons and tools will expand. The prep that I have always put upon myself for this event has been the biggest and most impressive whetstone I have ever really dealt with. I strongly recommend that you really think about it now, or just come and have fun. Goodness knows, I've seen people walk away with the sash who basically came and had fun. They were prepared, but they just did it for the joy. And the joy is one of those incalculable elements that really, really can distinguish a world-class performer. It's going to be different for everybody.
So I'm going to put this out again for the populace. If you have questions for our Bardic champions, please submit them.
Mm-hmm.
We have a little bit of time left to talk about stuff. So if you have a question, please don't be afraid to submit it. And I do appreciate all of our champions being available today to be able to talk to us about the upcoming competitions. I appreciate you all, and I really enjoy having this time to talk with you, since we don't really have a lot of time to talk to you at the events as we had usually planned. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
For those who in my head,
really
I don't know what I like anymore.
Geeking about the gamesmanship of this kind of stuff.
What was that, Your Majesty?
I was just saying, your comments about the finals being kind of very subjective at the whims of their majesties. I started to become introspective, and I realized I don't know what I like.
Oh,
right. I was like, what advice would I get? I don't even. So I'm stuck. I like the fact that I think Drake called me a monster. Right, I'm pretty sure that I'm hiding behind a door.
If you want, I'm happy to clarify that comment. And I know
I would have to say you'd be very high in XP if you ever.
No. I want to speak to that. The monster in that scenario for me was the loot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the other monster for me was playing and singing in front of a high pressure audience. Grim was the judge one year, and I choked. I face planted massively. It was really I turned very crimson. I got through it. I made the finals that year, mostly I think on chutzpah, and it happens. So for me, recognizing there were actually things that gave me stage fright because they weren't my comfort zone, that was my monster.
We did get a question from the populace. We did get a question from the populace, and I think Drake did touch on this a little bit. If you're not feeling comfortable in competing in the competition, you will still have a chance to perform in between rounds, so as we confer about who's going on in the next round. And please reach out to our champions and definitely see where you can be.
We will solicit that you please, if you have an interest in performing and not competing, while we're not going to strictly say we will not have any impromptu, given the likely nature of the event, it is really preferable this year that if you want to exhibit, that you reach out to us so that we can have in mind during the time slots of the day where we're going to be occupied, we're really going to want to have in mind that there are people we can count on to come in for those who are watching or listening at home or at the event and entertain them. And I've done it myself. It's a lot of fun and a lot less pressure.
And I will add, it's the nature of the beast that there are frequently moderate delays between rounds because we have to crunch numbers and things like that. So having people to fill up that space is always welcome.
Well, and also, this is one of my favorite things that in one of our conversations before tonight that Drake pointed out was sometimes some of the considerations of a large event like this is like the line to get lunch becomes less of a concern and more of an opportunity to showcase some people because my kitchen's right there and there's no line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Back to the preference thing though, if you don't mind, it's like, and it's entirely up to you. There definitely have been royals who've treated it like, okay, we're gonna assign the winner, the person I decide is the winner, to be kings and the second place to be queens. On the flip side of that, the very first one I attended, His Majesty wanted a poet and Her Majesty wanted somebody who could do improv. And that's exactly what they were looking for. And in the end, that's exactly what they got. Because there happened to be two people who were fit their description. But and for my opinion, that's fine.
Exactly. I mean, it's the way of things. And so, as I said, I learned over the course of several years, including a couple times making the finals and not being selected, that nobody owes you anything. You've put in time, you've improved, and that was the prize. Every year that I competed and wasn't selected, what my real prize was is I was a better bard than I was the year before. This year, my prize was I was a better bard than I was the year before. Also, I ended up having a job to do. And it's really important to think about it that way. It is an opportunity. My experience of it, the talent pool in this kingdom was impressive and somewhat intimidating when I first came to this event 8 years ago, which was the last time I believe that Grim, you were selected as King's Bard, alongside Lucian, who was about to become my first teacher. And in certain important respects, it's gotten harder since then. The talent pool is broader. It draws in a lot of people who bring in outside skill sets, which is such a boon to the kingdom. It is such a blessing for the populace. We have a pool of talent that on the same day as we're doing all this could perform an all-female and all-gender-flipped production of Henry V. Okay, we have people who are capable of directing a complete online staged reading of Beowulf start to finish, and it's going to involve a lot of the talent of this kingdom and talent from all over the known world, because we dig this stuff. This is what we do, and this is who we are. We've had the opportunity to share out videos. There are a few more like that coming, hopefully, in the next few months. As His Majesty once mentioned, there's a bunch of us, including several of the people here up right now in front of you, who are putting together a Shakespeare-inspired project that might be a little lighter in tone, if we, depending on how long it takes us to finish it.
All right, so I'm going to start to wrap things up.
Excellent.
Some of the main takeaways that I got from this was that if I wanted to enter the Bardic, is to bring it.
Mhm.
Yes.
Just bring it right out there. And if I was going to enter the A&S Championships, it'd be rubric. Reach out to the NOA's office and get a hold of that rubric and just figure out what it's all about.
And my takeaway was that if I wanted to try Bardic, or am doing it but am not ready to be champion, or if I was doing A&S and the rubric scared me, that I can still be there. I can still show what I do, maybe get some feedback, and embrace that community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to
Well,
put
the
out
feedback, you probably
Right,
best say so.
things you want to say before we kind of close things out.
I feel like we have covered it reasonably well. We are all available online. We can always, if it's ever necessary, we can always maybe post up to the EK to the EK group, and perhaps to the Bardic group for us. And of course, there are several A&S related groups on Facebook and mailing lists. We can always do a AMA kind of thing, for people who might find answering the questions online a little asynchronously, less intimidating, or who just don't have any thoughts yet, and it's going to come to you as you start preparing. If you like geekery and you're really, really interested in this kind of game analysis, I did it obsessively for several years. My blog is at drakethebard.com. And if you do a search on championships, I did pre and post game breakdowns that will save you the trouble of having those conversations with me, because at least you can just shut it off whenever you want to close the tab.
Thank you, Jake. I really appreciate that.
I'm here to serve.
All right. This has been an amazing conversation.
I really enjoyed it a lot. This was great.
You too.
It's fantastic to get to see all the champions. It's fantastic to get to talk about moving forward and supporting the communities. Thank you all so much for.
It's fantastic for the four of us to actually get to all wear our sashes at the same time.
I know.
One time.
It's just like work.
We miss you, Kingdom. We really, really do. We love you, and we're so grateful for this opportunity.
And thank you, Your Majesties, for giving us this opportunity to speak to your populace.
Yes.
It's very exciting for us.
Yeah, and for the time and thought that you've put into the conversations we've had about preparing for this, and to all of the encouragement that you both have given, certainly to me and Grim, in the time that we've seen, and everything we've seen you say about your other champions. We know you have our back, and that means the world to us.
Great. So good night, East Kingdom.
Good night. I got through it and I didn't sing at all.
That's all right. I'm going to take a moment to appreciate.
I'm so sorry I showed up late. I'm on crutches currently and I tripped. Oh, I'm still going.
They all ended up hearing me say I got through it and it didn't sing at all, which